Welcome to the 7th monthly web workshop on Fluke Connect. Today's topic is Fluke Connect Assets Overview. I will be providing you with an overview of Fluke Connect Assets along with a hands-on demonstration. My name is Chaun Carda. I am a Tier 2 Technical Support Engineer and the Fluke Lead. So before we begin, a few housekeeping items. The session will be recorded. Phones will be muted. Type questions at any time. Please limit questions to the topic of the workshop, and questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. So our topic overview or agenda for today, I will start by providing you with a Fluke Connect overview, a very high-level explanation of Fluke Connect. Next, I will provide a Fluke Connect Assets overview describing some of the features of the software. Then I will show you asset groups and subgroups, which will include adding, editing, and deleting them. Next, I will show you assets, which will include adding, editing, and deleting them as well, along with assigning measurements and viewing health status data. Then I will show you a couple of other asset features before doing a live demo. Finally, I will answer any questions during the questions and answers section at the end of the presentation. So our first section is a quick, high-level Fluke Connect overview. I just want to cover a few basic facts about Fluke Connect for anyone that may be new to the software. Fluke Connect works with over 80 different tools in 11 different categories, including digital multimeters, clamp meters, installation testers, vibration meters, scope meters, process meters, thermometers, insulation testers, infrared cameras, power loggers, and power quality monitors. The easiest way to tell if a tool will work with the Fluke Connect software is if it has the letters FC in the model name. So the 376 FC clamp meter, 1664 FC installation tester, T3000 FC temperature module, all would be Fluke Connect enabled. And the software is available in 73 countries. One other important note, the Fluke Connect software is 100% free, so please give it a try if you haven't done so already. The next item I'd like to cover is how Fluke Connect stores your data, basically the entire process flow from beginning of the problem to the data being visible on your local desktop. So let's say you have a problem with a rooftop HVAC package unit. It looks like an intermittent blower problem. That's a number one. Number two, you grabbed your 376 clamp meter to help diagnose the issue and you connect it to the blower motor. Then in number three, the 376 FC clamp meter communicates the readings to the Fluke Connect mobile app via a Bluetooth connection from a safe distance away. Then the Fluke Connect mobile app will upload the readings to the Fluke Connect cloud where they are permanently stored in in step number 4. If the cell phone is out of range, the data will be stored on the phone until it reconnects to a cell signal or Wi-Fi. And then in step number 5, users can then access the Fluke Connect data in the Fluke cloud via any web-enabled device, such as a web browser, the mobile app, or even our desktop software. So the next section is the Fluke Connect Assets Overview, where I will provide you with an overview of the Fluke Connect Assets software, including features and costs. So we'll start by defining what is an asset. An asset is simply property owned by a person or company regarded as having value. Fluke Connect Assets software has 22 different asset types available, including blower, boiler, breaker, busbar, chiller, compressor, connector, controller, disconnect, electrical panel, fan, fuse, generator, heater, motor, other, pump, steam trap, switch, transformer, UPS, and valve. Now, if you can't find an exact match with some, you can use something that's similar, or you can just use the asset type called other. Here we have photos of a chiller, a motor, and a pump. But maybe you're a home inspector, so your assets might be homes or individual rooms in a home. Or if you're a trucking company, your assets might be trucks. You can use our software to track the health of any asset. So Fluke Connect Asset features, or Fluke Connect Asset software features, includes all the free Fluke Connect measurement features, which is software that connects to over 80 different Fluke Connect enabled tools and works in 73 countries to provide electronic data capture and data logging functionality from a safe distance, with all the data stored in the cloud and accessible 24/7 from any web-enabled device. That's basically a summary of what the free Fluke Connect measurement software provides. When you purchase or sign up for the Assets trial software, in addition to those free features, you will also get here the ability to add, edit, and delete assets, asset groups, and asset subgroups, the ability to assign measurements to assets to track asset health over time, the ability to add, edit, and delete work orders, the ability to assign the status, priority, and type of work order, and finally, the ability to schedule the work order or assign it to a team member. Fluke Connect Assets software is also accessible via the web app. Up in the upper left-hand corner, you can see what it will look like on the web app. The mobile app, over here off to the right, these are 3 different screens from the mobile app showing assets, and the desktop app. So this is what the desktop app looks like. You'll notice it looks very similar to the web app. However, we do recommend using the web app for most Fluke Connect asset functionality because it's easier to maneuver in the web app. At a minimum, I would definitely use the web app when you start to add or create asset groups, asset subgroups, and assets. Then when you go out into the field to take a measurement reading or a thermal image, you can easily assign those measurement readings or thermal images to the assets that you've already created back in the office from the web app. It's just a much easier and much more efficient workflow. So Fluke Connect Assets software costs. So this is the Fluke Connect Assets software, not the free measurement software. The Fluke Connect Assets software subscription is a 1-year subscription and will cost each user $249. So if you have a team of 3 people, that would cost you a total of $747 per year. However, right now, we're offering a free 1-year trial license with full functionality available to you if you sign up between now and the end of the year. So if you haven't done so already, create your Fluke Connect account and get a free 1-year subscription to Fluke Connect Assets and all the features you see today. Be sure to have everyone on your team sign up as well so that you can share information among your team. That's a $249 cost savings for a single user and $747 savings for a team of 3. The next section is on asset groups and subgroups, where I will show you how to add asset groups, edit asset groups, and delete asset groups, and do the same with asset subgroups. Oh, oops, went the wrong direction. Okay, so asset groups are like file folders used to group and organize your assets. You choose the best way to organize your assets and then create the asset groups. You can see here next to the number 3, the asset groups that I have created in my demo account. So my assets are grouped using the organizational system of plants. So I've got plant 1, plant 2, and plant 3. But maybe you will have different names like the North plant, the South plant, or if you go by state names, maybe you have a big organization and your plants are in different states. You might have the West Virginia plant or the North Carolina plant. Or if you're an independent contractor, maybe your asset groups are actually going to be the names of your different customers. So you're an electrical vendor and you've got multiple companies that you service, and you may go out and do spot checks on their, electrical issues. You'll be able to go out and save their information into each one of these different asset groups by looking at the names of the asset groups. So in order to get to this area of the screen and the web information, you'll want to, next to the number 1, you'll want to click on the Assets tab, and that'll take you to this screen. And from there, if you want to view the assets and asset group in the asset group called Plant 1, you simply click on Plant 1, and you'll see here I'm now viewing the assets in Plant 1, and these are the assets that are currently in the asset group Plant 1. So it's just a couple of clicks to get you down to view the assets that are in the asset group Plant 1. So now that you've seen an overview of the asset groups and what they look like, I will start by going through step by step how to add or create an asset group. So first, the very first thing we need to do is when we're in the web app and we're working with assets, we want to click on the Assets tab. So next to number 1, we click the Assets tab. And then we go to the far left-hand corner, and you can see this is the area that contains our asset groups information. And if we want to add a new asset group, we click the plus sign. In Fluke Connect, whenever you see the plus, it will mean that that's how you go about adding or creating something new. And in this case, since the plus sign is next to the asset groups, the plus sign will create a new asset group for us. So we would just click the plus sign, and that will bring us to a pop-up box called Add Group. So we've clicked the plus sign. Now we can enter in the name of the new asset group that we want to add to our software. It's plant number 4. So next to the number 3, I just would type in the word plant 4. And then once I'm done, I simply tap the Save button. And once I do that, you'll see that I now have a new asset group called Plant 4. So if I click on that asset group, which I've done here, where you can tell that it's highlighted in blue, I can see here that I'm looking at the assets in the Plant 4 group. Well, there are no assets in the Plant 4 group, and that's because we just created the Plant 4 group. So we would have to go back in and add an asset to the Plant 4 group. So next, I will show you how to edit an asset group. You'll use your left mouse button to select the asset group that you want to add the asset or edit the asset group for. So you simply click on the asset group. So we'll work with Plant 4. And then if you go slightly over to the right of the actual asset group name, you'll see there are 3 little dots there. And if you click on the 3 dots next to the asset group name, a pop-up box comes up. And here you'll be able to see next to the number 2, we've got a couple of options for editing our asset group. We can rename it or we can move it. So we can choose to move this asset group to make it a subgroup of one of our existing groups if we like. Maybe we accidentally put it in the wrong spot, so we can relocate that. Next, I will show you how to delete an asset. So it's basically the same process as editing. You highlight the asset group that you want to delete. So you select here, then you click on the 3 little dots next to the name of the asset group. And the very bottom option here on the list is delete. So I could select this delete option from my drop-down list box here, and it would in fact delete all of the, it would delete this asset group. And what's very important to note here is when you delete an asset group, you will be deleting all of the assets in that asset group. So if there are assets in that group that you want to save, please move them to a different folder or a different asset group like Plant 1 or Plant 2 or Plant 3 before you delete the Plant 4 asset group. Because if you do delete the asset group, it will delete all of the asset subgroups and all of the assets in that asset group. Unfortunately, we've had customers call us in a panic and they've deleted the asset group unaware that that would in fact delete their assets. You will get a pop-up message warning you that that's going to happen, but oftentimes people will just click through the warning message and proceed with their action. So just a warning. So Fluke Connect Assets subgroups. That's the next thing we're going to talk about. Asset subgroups are also like file folders used to group and organize your assets, but give you the ability to add a hierarchy or levels to the structure. So here, if you look over here on this section of the screen, we've got Plant 1, 2, and 3, but in Plant 3, you can see that we've got a little up arrow or a down arrow, depending upon whether it's open or closed. And in Plant 3, you can see I've got 2 asset subgroups, one called Building A and one called Building B. So to get to this section of the software, again, you would start by clicking the Assets tab over here, number 1. Then next, in order to see the 2 subgroups under Plant 3, you would need to click this little arrow box. It faces up when it's open and down when it's closed. So it would be facing down, you'd click on it, and then you'd be able to see all the asset subgroups located in the asset group called Plant 3. Then remember, I highlight the asset group I want to look at the assets for, so I've highlighted my asset subgroup called Building A. So now I'm looking at assets from Building A, and you can see here I'm in the Plant 3 asset group. I'm in the Building A subgroup, and I'm looking at the assets that I have in that subgroup. So chiller 72, fan 82, motor 65. Those are the assets in that asset subgroup. Okay, now that you've seen an overview of the asset subgroups and what they look like, I will start by going through step-by-step how to add or create an asset subgroup. So just like before, you click the Assets tab. Step number 1, click the Assets tab. Step number 2, you highlight the asset group that you want to add the subgroup to. And then next, you'll want to click the 3 little dots next to the asset group that you want to add the asset subgroup to. So you click the 3 little dots and you can see our first option on the list is Add Subgroup. So next to the number 3, we'd simply click Add Subgroup. And once we do that, we get the pop-up box for Add Group. And we can type in the name of our subgroup, Building A, Building B. You can see next to the number 4, this is an open field that I can enter anything in. Now, if a lot of customers don't do it this way, they don't use like Building A, Building B. They like to group their assets by type. I've seen, so customers will have an asset group called Plant 4, but then under Plant 4, they'll have folders called, motors, chillers, fans, and they put all of their assets grouped by type in different folders or subfolders, or in other words, asset subgroups underneath the main asset group folder. In our case, we're using Building A, so we're going to type in Building A, and then we just click the Save button here next to the number 5. So now you can see that under the asset group called Plant 4, we've got a newly created asset subgroup called Building A. So Plant 4, Building A, and here are the assets in that new subgroup. Of course, there are none because it's a brand new asset subgroup. So next, I will show you how to edit an asset subgroup. This works pretty much exactly the same way it works for editing asset groups. So I just click on the asset subgroup that I want to edit, which is again Building A, and then I click on the 3 little dots next to the Building A, and I'll get this list of options available. And here again, I have the option to rename this asset subgroup or move this asset subgroup. So I can choose to move this asset subgroup to a different asset group, or if I wanted to, I could promote this asset group to make it one of the main asset groups. So I could do that simply by clicking on Ungrouped Assets. And that tells our software that we don't want this to be a subgroup. We want this to be, in fact, a main asset group. Next, I will show you how to delete an asset subgroup. And this again works very much the same way as it does for an asset group. You click on the asset subgroup that you want to delete. You click the 3 little dots to get the pop-up menu option here. And the last option available for us to choose next to the number 2 is the delete option. So we click delete, and that will delete the asset subgroup. Here again, very important note, this will delete all of the assets in the asset subgroup. So if you want to save those assets, please be sure to move those assets to another asset folder or another asset group. You will get a warning message saying, warning, this will delete all of the assets in this asset subgroup. Please, beware of that. So you do get the pop-up warning, but like I said, we do have customers call in occasionally. Not very often. I think most of them see the message and are aware that that will actually delete their assets. But if they're in a hurry, they may click right past that warning message. So the next section is on assets, where I will show you how to add assets, edit assets, and delete assets. So once again, just a quick recap, what is an asset? Assets are property owned by a person or company regarded as having value, and it's very simplest definition. And a reminder, Fluke Connect has 22 different asset types available. So here you can see basically this is kind of an overview of what the assets are going to look like. You click on the Assets tab, then you click on the asset group that you want to look at. You can see we're looking at the assets in Plant 1, and here are the names of our assets in Plant 1. So we've got backroom boiler, chiller, compressor, and fan, and the corresponding asset types that we've selected for our assets. So I keep it pretty simple. Backroom boiler is the name of the asset type is boiler. Chiller, compressor. Obviously, if you have a bigger company, you're going to have more than one chiller, more than one compressor, so you're going to need to come up with some sort of naming convention. And quite honestly, for assets, most customers use a combination of numbers and description. So, they'll use like motor 25 or some sort of unique naming convention that they come up with. And that's what I'd recommend you to do too. Take a few minutes, sit down, look at your equipment, your assets, and if you haven't ever done this, kind of plan out a good naming convention to use. Okay, so now that you've seen an overview of the assets and what they look like, I'll start by going through step by step how to add or create an asset. So again, step number 1, since we're working with assets, click on the Assets tab. Step number 2, select the asset group or subgroup where you want to add your new assets. So this is often where customers get confused. They just, the software, when they log in, they click assets, and then this will randomly land on, say, ungrouped assets. And then they go over here and you'll see, remember I said that the plus sign always means add or create in Fluke Connect. They'll go over here and click this option, and that's how you add an asset. But because they haven't selected the correct asset group or subgroup, that asset gets dumped into the ungrouped assets area. Now, don't worry, once you've created an asset, you can always move it to the correct location, but it's good to just figure out where you need to work. And in this case, we want to work in the asset subgroup called Building A. So we're in Plant 4, Building A, and then we want to click the plus sign to add a new asset. So I click the plus sign, and that pops up our Add Asset screen. So you can see over here, if you're ever in doubt of where you're at, take a peek over here to the upper left-hand side of the screen. It says you're adding an asset. So here we've got a couple different fields we need to populate in order to create our asset. This asset, as I've said, is going to go into the asset group called Plant 4, the asset subgroup called Building A. I type in the name of the asset, let's see, motor 25. I type in the asset ID. This is going to be a unique identifier specific to this asset, say something like a serial number. And the asset name is mandatory. That's an absolute mandatory field. The asset ID is not a mandatory field. So if you're not using any type of unique identifier system for your assets, don't worry, just leave this blank. You can come back and fill this in later if you want. But it does have to be unique. So if you put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you can only have that asset ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for this particular asset. It's got to be specific and unique to this particular asset. Asset type, remember we've got the option to choose from 22 different asset types: motor, chiller, bus bar, electrical panel, fan, etc. And next we've got the status update. You can see here it says status. The default is green or good, but we could select from our drop-down list box. There are 5 other options to choose from, or a total of 5 options: good, satisfactory, unsatisfactory, unacceptable, and unassigned. And below that, you'll see that we've got something called an asset test point. This is where all the data gets actually assigned to. You can have more than one test point on an asset. Obviously, with like our vibration sensors, we definitely, usually do have more than one asset point, or test point on an asset, so that we can track data in multiple locations. But to start out with, you'll get a default of 1, and you can go back in and add more test points. Once we've entered in all this information, you'll see up here next to the number 8, we've got the blue done button. So we would click the blue done button. So on the next screen, we're still in add asset mode. I've typed in my information, the name of my asset, motor 85, my unique identifier. I've selected the asset type called motor, and I've changed the status from good to satisfactory. So I've entered the information that I want to enter. So I'm ready to click the done button. So I just click done. And now I'm on the next screen, which is that the asset has been created. So you can see over here, it no longer says add asset because I'm actually in the asset called motor 85. I can also see that here because it says the name of the asset's called motor 85. I've got my unique identifier, my asset type, and the status of the asset. So it's satisfactory. Now across the top here next to the number 4, we've got some additional bits of data for this particular asset: information, alarm, status, analysis, save data, etc. But because this is a brand new asset, this is all empty. So there isn't much to show here. So I will show you that later on an asset that I have that has data already on it. So the next thing I wanted to show you is how to edit an asset. Once you're in the detail level of the asset, so you can see I'm looking at the Motor 85 asset, and it's been saved. If I want to change any of the information here, I can simply click on the pencil icon next to the number 1. And Fluke Connect, anytime you see a pencil icon, it means you can edit. So that's true of our thermal images, that's true of our assets. That's basically what we use throughout the software to indicate an edit option. So the plus sign means add or create, the pencil icon means edit. So in this case, I've clicked the pencil icon, and now you can see that all of the fields are now available for me to edit. So if I accidentally entered in the wrong asset ID, I fat fingered the numbers or whatever, I can go back in and change that to correct that information. I can update the asset status. I can change the health of the asset if it's getting better or worse. And then once I've updated the information, I simply click the save button next to the number 7. So now to delete an asset, you go to the Asset tab, select the asset group, then the asset that you want to delete. And then you'll see next to the number 2, you click on the drop-down list box for the asset, and you've got some options here. You can view the asset, so go into the detailed view mode that we were just looking at. You can move the asset if it's in the wrong asset subgroup or asset group. We can move it to a different location. We can create reports for this asset, or we can delete it. In that case, that's what we're covering today. We're talking about deleting it. So to delete an asset, you go to the Asset tab, you find the asset group where your asset's located. You see that this is the asset that you may want to delete. You click the drop-down box over here and you select the delete option. It seems like a long way to go, but in general, most people don't delete their assets very often. So unless you're selling your assets, or it's obsolete equipment that you're getting rid of, or you want to remove from your inventory, so this isn't going to be used very often probably. Okay, next I will show you how to assign one measurement to an asset. So because we're now working with the measurements, I want to go to the Measurements tab. So here at the top, before we've been doing all of our work in the Assets tab. Now, because we're assigning measurements to an asset, we're going to move over to the Measurements tab. So you'll see if I click on the Measurements tab, I'll get a list of all of the measurements in my account that I've ever taken forever. So in this case, we're going to take just the very first measurement reading, which was a 376 FC clamp meter reading that was taken on July 17th, 2020 at 3:41 p.m. And I want to take this information and assign it to my newly created asset. So here you'll see I have an option that says Assign to Asset. And next to that, there's a little tiny chain link. It looks like a chain, basically, like a couple of links in a chain. So I would just click the Assign to Asset option here to assign this asset, and that will take me to this screen, which is basically my asset screen. So from here, it says I'm in the assign asset mode. I select where my asset's located. So I select the asset group next to the number 2. I know my asset's in plant 1. Then I need to select the actual asset in plant 1. So which asset I'm going to assign it to. Next to the number 3, it happens to be the backroom boiler asset. And then the last step is that this is the name of the asset point for the backroom boiler. Now I only have one asset point, so only one appears, but if I had multiple asset points, I'd have to pick which asset point to assign this measurement to. Now once I'm done, I click the Assign button. It's a little blue button here next to the number 5 to actually execute the action. So I'm taking that 376 clamp meter reading and assigning it to my existing asset called backroom boiler. So I click on Assign, and it's assigned. And I'll show you that in the live demo as well. Now doing it one at a time is possible and is one way to go. However, maybe it's the end of the week and you've done your maintenance rounds, so you have maybe a week's worth of data, all different kinds of measurements that you want to assign to the appropriate assets. And you don't want to do this one at a time because it will take you forever and you want to go home on Friday. So I'll show you how to assign 2 or more measurements to an asset. Again, because we're working with measurements, we start with the Measurements tab. Then the next thing we want to do is select all of the measurements that we want to assign to that asset. So We select this measurement by clicking on the little checkbox next to the number 1. We select the second measurement reading next to the number 2. So maybe I took this on, in this case, I happen to take these both on the same day, but maybe I took this one on the 17th and this one on the 18th because I've gone out every day to do my inspection rounds and I've taken a new measurement every day. So I select all of the measurements I want to assign to the same asset. And then remember how this assign to asset option has this little chain link icon here? If you go up to the very top, you'll see we've also got that same icon up here. It's a chain link. So to select multiple measurements to assign to an asset, you click the checkbox and then you come up here to the top and you click on that little chain link fence. And guess what? You get this little message. It's just a warning message that says the selected measurements might already be assigned to an asset. So the 2 measurements I selected, now you can tell that they aren't assigned to an asset, but if they were, this is just a warning that's saying, hey, you're going to break the link between the measurements that you've selected if they're already assigned to an asset, and you're going to reassign them to a new asset. So do you want to continue? Now in my case, I know I do. So I click continue. I click the little blue continue button. And we're back to this familiar screen. In this case, we're assigning 2 measurements to an asset, but we select the asset group, then we select the asset. Again, we're putting these on the backroom boiler asset. So then I select the asset point, test point, and I click assign. So once I click the blue assign button, I can, and I'll show you this in the live software, I can now see that both of those assets, or both of those measurements, have been assigned to the same asset, the backroom boiler assets. So far I've shown you how to add, edit, and delete asset groups, subgroups, and assets. So you should be all set when it comes to actually maneuvering through the assets, because you can add, edit, and delete. Those are the main functions that you need to do with any of those asset features, asset groups, subgroups, or assets. So now I'll show you a quick way to search for an asset group, subgroup, or an asset so you can find the ones you want to work on more quickly. I work with customers all the time, and most of them have hundreds of asset groups and thousands of assets. Now, they may need to search for an asset or an asset group specifically. So I want to show you how to do that. Over here, real quickly at the top, we've got next to the number 1, we've got the ability to look at all of our assets or just those that are condition monitored. So our condition monitoring products include the 3540 FC power monitor and the 3502 FC/3561 FC vibration gateway and sensors. And if you're using either one of those products and those are assigned to any specific assets, you can click here, condition monitoring, to quickly see those assets, to view the graphs and data being generated by those specific products. In our case, we don't have those products, so we're just going to look at all of our assets. So we want to make sure that we've got the all option selected here. Next to the number 2, you'll see that we've got the word assets, but we also have a little drop-down box here. That's because this can toggle between assets or asset groups. So if I want to search for an asset group, I click the down arrow, toggle to asset groups, type in the name of the asset group I want to search for. Maybe it's plant 752. I don't think we have any companies that big, but it could be. Excuse me. So you could type that information in here, and then you have to click the hourglass, or the little magnifying glass rather, and then that will execute the search. You could do the same for an asset. The great thing is too is that, excuse me, if you've used a common naming convention, like you put the word motor in all of your motor type assets, you could just type in the word motor and it will pull up every asset with the word motor in it. So automatically you can do that. Most customers I work with have thousands of assets and hundreds of asset groups, like I just said, but it's amazing because they don't even need to use the search option. They know exactly where to go and find a very specific asset in an asset group. So it's amazing. Our customers are very impressive. But for those of us in tech support, or maybe someone who's handling assets, they're on vacation, so they're backup, they may not have the asset information memorized like the primary user. So it's good to have these search options available. Next, so the last screen was search options. This screen is filter options. So here next to the number 1, if you click on the funnel, you'll get this little pop-up, and you've got 2 options. You can filter your assets by asset type. So those are those 22 different asset types we have available: blower, boiler, breaker, busbar, etc. Or by status. So we've got this is the health status of the asset: good, satisfactory, unsatisfactory, and so on. So maybe I want to, in my scenario, I want to look at just all of my boilers. So I would select the asset type boiler, and I only want to look at the ones that are in unacceptable condition, because those are the ones that we may need to have to replace or do some additional preventive maintenance on, or what have you. So I could select boiler and unacceptable, and then search for all of the assets that meet those two criteria. So I could easily pull that information up so that I could work on those. Maybe create some additional work orders or some routine preventive maintenance for those. So next, we're going to talk about asset health status. So one of the most valuable parts of the Fluke Connect assets is to be able to discern the health of your assets by tracking measurements over time. So we select an asset to review, say motor in plant 1, and we're going to go to the assets group or the assets tab to select that information. So here we're going to remember we have to select the asset group, so plant 1, and then we're going to select the asset called motor. Next, remember I said I would come back to this and show you the information across the top of the screen here. So for the asset called motor, this is the asset we're working on called motor. If I click on the Save Data option, I can see all of the measurements that have ever been assigned to this asset. So this is a T3000 FC reading that was taken on 9/23 at 7:15, another T3000 FC reading at 9/22 at 12:56, a 376 FC reading taken on 9/22 at 12:42. I can scroll through and see the history of all the measurements that we've assigned to this asset. So any type of technical information that we want to store electronically for this asset, we can do that. No more writing down with paper and pencil, no more keeping things in notebooks. It's all saved electronically, and because this is in the cloud, this is accessible by any web-enabled device. So you can get this information across the software. Next, after we've pulled up the asset called motor, we can go to the next option, which is the analysis option at the top. So if I've taken a T3000 temperature reading every month for the last 6 months, the analysis tab will show a graph of all of those readings so I can see if my asset is getting hotter and might be a problem. The same is true for the 376 clamp meter reading, and even for thermal images like you see here. So here you can see there's a little bit of, it's called a carousel, and at the bottom I've taken a thermal image on 7/10, on 11/8, and on 12/3. And if this were live software, I could click on each one of these thumbnail views to rotate the main view to see what the information is on the main screen here. And it's cut off, but I'll show it to you on the next slide. The center points, you can see the center point information here, which is 81.26 degrees, are plotted along a graph. So you can see not only the actual thermal image itself, you can see the center point information plotted because we're looking at the analysis of the data. So so toggle to the next screen. This is still looking at the analysis option. These are the thermal images and the center point temperatures that were plotted along a graph. The next graph down, next to the number 2, is amps. So we've taken, using a different tool, we've taken multiple readings on different dates. Looks like this was taken on 1/16/2020, and this one was taken on 9/22/2020. So it's automatically plotted the 2 data points that we have from this particular tool. The same is true for degrees Fahrenheit. So next to number 3, it's dropped off the bottom there, but you can see that. So one note, if you only have, say, a single T3000 reading, then there's not enough data to create a graph yet, right? So once you've added 2 or more of the same types of readings, whether it's a T3000 reading, a 376 reading, or readings from any one of our 80 Fluke Connect enabled tools, you'll see the graph. But oftentimes customers will click on the analysis tab, and because they've only entered in a single reading or a single thermal image, the main page there will say not enough data, and customers don't understand why. And it's simply just because you haven't added enough data points for us to plot a graph or do any type of analysis on the data. So once you've reviewed the data trends on the analysis tab, you can move to the status tab. Next to the number 1, you would click on the status tab. And here you can make adjustments to the health status of your asset. So maybe you see it getting hotter using the thermal imager or the T3000, so you might want to downgrade your health status from good from the status of good to satisfactory. And I can make a note here. I can explain exactly why I'm downgrading the health status. This particular asset is running hot, which is why we downgraded it from good to satisfactory. But you can review the information on the save data area, all the different readings. You can review the analysis information, which is automatically plotting graph points for you if you're doing preventive maintenance over time to determine what you think the status should be. You control the status because you're the expert. You're the one that knows the equipment the best. So you decide what the health status of your assets are. Think of how valuable this information might be to your manager or customer. Cold, hard facts about the health of their assets. Okay, before we wrap up, the next section will cover a couple more Fluke Connect asset features that you might find helpful. We've covered all the nuts and bolts with the asset groups, subgroups, and assets, but there are a couple of cool features that are also available in the Fluke Connect Assets software. So if we go to the Assets tab, you'll see this little tiny icon over here. It looks like a page with an arrow through it next to the number 1. That is called the asset import functionality. And if you click on that, you'll get this pop-up box that explains how to go about importing your assets. Because you're telling me maybe, Chaun, this is great, but I literally have thousands of assets and I already have all that information in an Excel spreadsheet. I don't want to have to manually enter all 1,000 assets into your software. That will take me forever. Okay, that's fine. We understand that, and we have a solution for that. You can download the asset import template, which is an Excel file that we created that you can copy your asset information into. You have to use our template. You can't use your Excel file. It will create crazy results. But if you download our asset import template, copy information about your assets into our template, then you can upload that information from the Excel file, the asset import template file, to our Fluke Connect software. And then that data will automatically populate all the asset group information and all the asset information. It's amazing. It works. It's fast, and it's very, very good. It's something you might want to check out if you do have a lot of assets and you already have that information in an Excel format or a CSV format, or you can put it into an Excel format. So the opposite of import is export. So you're saying, Chaun, we have all this great data in our software here. We've got asset information. We've taken these readings for all of these assets. I want to be able to export that information so I can have it in, say, an Excel file, or dump it out so that I can look at it on a piece of paper. We can do that too. So you go to the Export tab, you select, there's only one option under the drop-down list box that says export, it's asset export. And from there, it will prompt you to select asset groups and the asset information that you want to export. Because again, if you do have hundreds of asset groups and thousands of assets, you may not want to have one gigantic file. You may want to do it in smaller chunks of data. So you can do that, select the asset groups that you want to download the data for, and select this option. It'll automatically generate a file. We'll give it a unique identifier export name, but you'll see a date and time stamp for that file. You'll see the user who created that file, and you can click the download. This is actually a hyperlink that will download the XLS file to your computer. So if you clicked on that, it would download the file. Next, we've got reports. So in the Fluke Connect web software, you would click on the reports tab. You can click the create report option and select the asset reports. And here you could generate a specific report by asset. You can see here it's got the date and time stamp and the username of the person that created it. You could download that report as a PDF file and email that report to people within your organization or outside your organization. Okay, now I will show you how to use some of the features you just saw in the Fluke Connect Asset Overview. All right, so now we are logged into the live software. You can see here I'm logged in as my demo account, Riley Russell. I'm currently on the measurements tab. So if I scroll down, you'll see all the different measurements I have. Another quick thing to point out is that because this is not currently assigned to an asset, I have that as an option. I can also assign this measurement to a work order. But if I scroll down, if I keep going, there, I can find this is a measurement reading that I already have associated to existing asset. This asset happens to be the motor asset in the Plant 1 asset group. So if you ever want to go through and check real quick, here's another one, the chiller asset in the Plant 1 group. And I know this is about assets, so we won't focus too much on this, but if I wanted to, I could filter the view and I could see all of my unassigned measurements. Remember how I said maybe at the end of every week you go in and you take all of your unassigned measurements and assign them to assets so that you keep your software updated? Well, this is a quick and easy way to sort through. This is the filter view, so if I click unassigned, it will only show me just the measurements that have not yet been assigned to an asset. So that's a quick way to do for workflow anyway. Now, we're focusing on assets, so we're going to click on the Assets tab. And here you can see I've got my ungrouped assets, which is, we have to have that group, by the way, because if you ever accidentally create an asset outside of an asset group, it needs to fall somewhere. So it's going to fall in the ungrouped assets. And these are just 2 default assets that we give you when you create your software. Just leave them in there so you have an example of what an asset needs to look like. Now, I've got 5 different asset groups, Plant 1 through 5. And you can see by looking at the screen here, plants 1 and 2 don't have a down arrow next to them, which means that they don't have any asset subgroups. Plant 3 does have a down arrow, and you can see here I've got 2 asset subgroups, building A and building B. Building 4 has plant 4 has 1 subgroup, and Plant 5 has 1 subgroup as well. Now in my case, I just want to create a brand new asset group. So remember, we go next to the asset groups. The plus sign always means add or create. So I click on the plus sign. And in my case, I'm just going to go ahead and create a new one called Plant 6. We're following our naming schema that we came up with, so we're consistent. I type in whatever I want to name the asset group, and then I click the Save button. Because this is a web application, we need to give it a few seconds to refresh. So it did that automatically, and now you can see we've got a new asset group called Plant 6 created. So remember, in order to create an asset subgroup, I need to select the asset group where I want to put that new subgroup, and then I need to click on the 3 little dots next to the name of the asset group. So I left mouse click, single click on those 3 dots, and then I get this pop-up. Now, just a quick review, I can add a subgroup, I can rename this. If I accidentally named it an incorrect name, I can move this. So I can move this to make it a subgroup of one of the other groups. Or if I just want to start over because I messed up, I can delete this. In our case, we're going to add a subgroup, and we're going to follow our standing naming convention. You can see I've already used building A and other asset groups, so it pops up based on my browser settings. So I typed in building A, I click save. Again, we have to wait a moment for the web screen to refresh. And here we go. So now under Plant 6, our brand new asset group, we've got a new asset subgroup called Building A. Next, I will create a new asset in our asset subgroup Building A in the asset group Plant 6. So does anybody remember how we do that? Off to the very far right, we've got a plus sign, and if you hover, it'll tell you that that's going to add. So we've selected the location where we want to put our new asset in Plant 6 group, Building A subgroup. So we come over here, we click add, and now we're on the add asset screen. So you can see over here in the upper left, it says add asset. So I just need to fill in the information here, the name of the asset ID. This is optional, but it does need to be a unique identifier. So I'm going to type in the name of my asset. Oops. It's going to be Motor 99. And then for an asset ID, I can't use a pre-existing ID because that would not be unique. So we're just going to try to type in something random. Because this happens to be a motor asset, I'm going to look through the 22 different options I have available, and there's the one that matches, motor. You can see it will automatically create an asset test point. And if I wanted to, I could change the asset status. So maybe I say, well, it's not really good, it's satisfactory. And I'm just going to explain that this is older equipment. So there's nothing wrong with it necessarily, but it's probably not in its good or prime state. It's older, so it's going to be satisfactory. And then I click confirm, and you can see that the status has changed from good to satisfactory. It automatically date and time stamps when I did this. So this is today's date and time, and it shows the username of the person that changed the status. So if you've got a team of people, you can check to see who was the one that made the change, and you can look at the explanation for why that change was made. So I'm still in the add asset mode. This information has not yet been saved, so I'm done entering my information. So I simply click the done, the blue done button. And now you can see I'm no longer in the add asset mode. I'm actually viewing the details of my asset. The asset I'm looking at is called Motor 99. That information is up here on the left. And you can see that this asset is in Plant 6, Building A. That's the name I gave it. That's the unique identifier, and that's the type of asset. And there we go. So if I wanted to edit this information, again, remember, pencil icon means edit. So I could click the edit option, and now all of these fields are open for me to change. So if I accidentally pick the wrong type of asset, or if maybe my manager told me to change the status back to good, I could go back in and make any changes. Now, we don't actually want to make any changes, but so let's go look for Motor 99 back on the main asset page. To get back to the main asset page from the detail view, we just simply click on the asset option here at the top. That'll refresh our screen and take us back to the main asset view. So here we can see we've got Plant 6. We see we've got the little drop-down box, which means we've got subgroups under here. So to see those subgroups, we click that drop-down box. I click on the asset subgroup called Building A. Wait for the information to come up on the screen, and here's the brand new motor that asset that we just created called Motor 99. So Motor 99 with the asset ID, asset type, date and time stamp. Okay, the next thing we want to do is assign some of the measurements that we've taken over the course of the week to this newly created asset. So we're done working with assets, and we're going to look at measurements. Remember, we click on measurements, and here we can see a bunch of T3000 readings we've taken. So there's a couple on 1027, a couple going back as far as 923. Oh, that one's taken. This one, 923. So we've got this one. So let's go in and let's just start at the top for simplicity's sake. And I want to assign this measurement reading from the T3000 to my newly created asset. So I click the Assign to Asset option. And then I go find the asset I want to assign it to. So I click on the drop-down arrow to get the subgroup to pop up, and then I click on that to show all of the data in that folder. I click there to assign it to an asset. This is the asset test point. I click Assign. And now you can see that this T3000 measurement has been assigned to Motor 99 and Asset Subgroup Building A in Plant 6. So that's a reading that we took on 10/28 at 7:46 a.m. So let's go down and find, here's one we have from 10/27. So let's go ahead and assign this particular measurement, this T3000 measurement, to that same asset. So we click Assign to Asset. We're just repeating the process. We're going to go back to the asset group, click here. We click the asset we want to assign the measurement reading to, click the Assign button. And now we can see, we'll scroll down and find that. Where did it go? There it is. Sorry, guys. So T3000 FC taken on 10/27 is now assigned to Motor 99 on Building A subgroup and Plant 6 group. So let's go back over to that asset. Remember, click the drop-down list box, click the subgroup, let's look at the detailed view of the asset, see what happens, and voila. Because we've plotted two different readings from the same tool, a T3000 FC tool, one from 10/28 and one from, I believe it was a later date, we've got that information plotted on the graph under the analysis tab, or subtab rather. So if I wanted to, I could click on Save Data, and here I can see I've got two different readings, one from 1027 and one from 28. And it automatically plotted those two readings on the Analysis tab. Now, if I had multiple thermal images, multiple 376 FC clamp meter readings, that information would appear here as well. So, oops, sorry guys. Okay, so that concludes the presentation portion of the 7th Fluke Connect workshop. Tomorrow, you will all be receiving an email thanking you for attending. It will include a link to the recording of this presentation and a link to register for the next FC workshop on Wednesday, December 2nd. Note the special date. It's not the 4th Wednesday of the month. It's a special date for the end of the year holiday situation. So FC workshop on Wednesday, December 2nd, where I will be covering Fluke Connect work orders, how to create them, edit them, and assign measurements to them. It's all about work orders in our next session, so please join me. Also, at the conclusion of this session, you will be asked to provide feedback on the presentation in a short survey, so please take a moment to do so. I'd really appreciate it. I will be taking questions now. As a reminder, please keep questions to the topic we just covered. If you have other questions or your Fluke question doesn't get answered in my session, feel free to contact the technical support team at Fluke Connect Support at fluke.com. Again, that's the word Fluke Connect Support at fluke.com, or give us a call at 425-200-0080. So give me a moment to stop the recording, and then we will go ahead and take questions rather.